Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another match preview on the Babylon Eyes channel with myself and Mike. Today, we're going to be breaking down the upcoming Fulham clash, a must-win for Moyes, a must-not-lose for Moyes, according to the media. And yeah, we're going to be breaking down where we should be particularly careful with the Fulham squad and how we can potentially look to get something from this game. So, Mike, here we go again. This was the week of death for us, the week of everything for us. We got one win, we got one absolutely massive loss. Now we're going into that Fulham game and confidence at an all-time low once again. How are you feeling going into this after the midweek thumping by Newcastle?
In a weird way, I feel okay. Like I say, I kind of have been expecting us to take our licks in a game this season and get a Tonkin. By the Brighton game, it hadn't happened. This was one of the saving graces why people were saying, no, but we're good, because we haven't taken an absolute Tonkin in the smashing. But we did against Newcastle, deservedly so. Yes, there were errors in that kind of played a part, but ultimately, structurally, we weren't good enough. I'm hoping it woke Moyes up to a few things, but he is a stubborn old goat. So likelihood is it'll be a rehashing of the same. And, as Einstein said, or as the idea on insanity is, it's the same, doing the same thing and again, expecting different results.
Yeah.
Moyes is testament to that philosophy.
Absolutely. I think going into this game against the Fulham side that, again, are going to be weakened as well. They're not going to have Mitrovic. He's obviously got that lengthy ban. Then Marco Silva's going to have the touchline ban. They've got a couple injuries to the likes of Willian. If we'd have got even a loss on Wednesday but played well and, shown a bit more, we'd be going into this match probably quite confident. But now, absolutely the other way. And, we look at the head-to-head for this season, how both teams are performing. That position, we're definitely not 10th. We are not. We should be about 15th or 16th, I think. But yeah, Fulham are 10th. They have 12 more points than us and 4 more wins than us with 11 wins compared to our 7. And one big stat, yeah, we've had 7 wins, but only 1 away from home. And that was, back in August against Aston Villa.
The Premier League.
Yeah, exactly. So we now have 10 games left in the Premier League. 6 of them are going to be away from home and only 4 are actually at home, and 3 of those home matches are against Arsenal, Liverpool, and United. So we're going to have to somehow find some way of getting these points on the road, because otherwise we will go down. There's no getting away from that. We will go down if we don't pick up at least 3 or 4 wins from now until the end of the season. And in those home games, are they going to come from those? No, 1, maybe max 2 from those 4 fixtures on a good day. So we're going to have to rely on our away form, and it has to start this weekend against Fulham, because this is the exact game where we should be winning, because Fulham have fallen off. They've completely overperformed if you look at kind of statistics throughout the season, and now it's kind of balancing out. This is a game we should be looking to win. Absolutely 100%. And yeah, before we kind of get into a couple of the things that Fulham will do you see this as a winnable game in the context of how we're playing, regardless of how we line up or whatever Moyes decides to do? Is it still a winnable game in your eyes?
Yeah, it is a winnable game. Even us playing badly, this should be a winnable game. And that's no disrespect to Fulham. But as we've said, statistically, they have overperformed this season. And they are a well-structured team, but they do give you ways in which to get in between them, get at them, and score. Them losing Mitrovic is a big thing. Obviously, they do play Vicinius. Obviously, Willian again is another big one. And if Marco Silva also has a touchline ban, then that also removes another element. So it can work in 2 ways. It could make a siege mentality for them, and then play up. But ultimately, we should beat them. We didn't play very well in the game that we beat them at home. We had a couple of big strokes of luck.
I think that was the first time we'd come from behind to win a game that season.
It was 3-1, wasn't it? I think that game. And yeah, we didn't play very well in that game. Fulham played pretty well. I think it could be much the same. We probably won't play very well, but we should have enough about us. If you go man for man,
Yeah.
not many of those Fulham players are you putting in ahead of West Ham, and that's not with kind of West Ham kind of tinted glasses on. I think it's just truth. If you ask the majority of fans, not many of those players are going to get picked ahead of a West Ham player.
Just a quick message to say, if you are enjoying this video, make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel, as we are posting regularly and it would really help us out. And yeah, leave a like on the video too. Let's get back into it. Mate, at the start of the season, you'd say that about a lot of teams. Like, looking at our XI on paper, I know, again, on paper, it can be a bit of a grey area, but man to man, we have excellent players in our squad, which makes it even more confusing that we're in this situation. And talking more about Fulham, we'll get into kind of West Ham in a minute, but there's a couple of things, that they will do. They're, in terms of their build-up play, they are quite patient. They won't, rush things. So just talk us through Mike, kind of what Fulham will play like when they do have possession of the ball and what we can kind of expect when we go there on Saturday.
Yeah, one of the things we've got to be aware of is obviously they like to build from the back. And to say that Bernd Leno is considered a quite important cog in that would be a huge understatement. So in the last game, so against Bournemouth, I think he was involved. He had 50 passes. 40 of those were open play, or 40 to 41 were in open play.
Oh, wow.
He is incredibly well used. And we have to acknowledge the fact that they are going to split their defence. So arguably what we really need to do is you turn around and you look to utilise really your wingers in which to cover two players. They need to cover the fullbacks and the centre-backs when they kind of split. And that's going to be supported by, say, Antonio. If we assume Antonio is going to play, who is then going to be drifting between those two centre-backs, but then also being in a position where he can force the goalkeeper. Also, the midfield has to push high because you need to essentially suffocate them because they do give up opportunities. Against Bournemouth, they did give the ball away a fair bit because Bournemouth kind of pushed high and Bournemouth played 4-4-2. I think we play a 4-4-2. We got played through in our midfield. Now we have to be in a position where we place pressure on those ball players. As we know, Issa Diop can be decent if given time on the ball, but he can also make mistakes. Yep. Tim Ream, again, isn't an exceptional defender by any stretch of the imagination. I don't think any of those Fulham players you would say are exceptional players. But they're very well drilled in a formation and a style that they've played for the past season and a half with Marco Silva. So they're very much seasoned in it. I think what's happening now is where they've seen their form start to dip is because ultimately the overall quality of the Premier League starts to come more to the fold as the season develops. I think teams that tend sometimes to start very well, they sometimes fall off because it's hard for them to maintain, in some ways, the luck.
I think for Fulham, it was always about just staying in the Premier League because they've been up, down,
exactly.
just getting that stability.
And that's exactly what they've done. They had an incredibly strong start, and that's what's going to basically secure them their Premier League survival. They've been a bit inconsistent since the turn of the year. And one of those is because they have quite an expansive open style, really. The way they like to play out from the back, the way they like to build up from the back also means that they are going to give away possession if you attack them in the right way. Now, we said they don't rush possession, but what they can be quite direct. And that's not to say they're a long ball team. It's that when they get possession, they look to play quick interchanges. They look to kind of move up the pitch vertically, quickly. They'll do a lot of outside to inside movements with the ball, but really what they're looking to do is move up the pitch vertically and attack that central space.
Yeah.
And they kind of play positioning as well. So if you see, for instance, Divock Reed on the right-hand side playing in the right actual wing position, you will see Tete will play in that inside space. So it's that much positional space. You don't occupy the same space. So you're always essentially create angles for passes. And that's what they look to do. They look to utilise that positional play, not to the same level of Brighton. And obviously Man City did a prime example of, the exceptional elite version. And then you kind of, as you start to go down, you see clubs like Brighton being in there and so on. but it's all about creating angles by being in those different positions. And so if one's out wide, you drop slightly in centrally. So they do that quite well. An example where they did that was against Bournemouth, and in particular the goal that they scored. So, an example of this is obviously they get the ball on the wing. Again, if we talk about positions, look where they are. You've got obviously Reed in the centre. You've got Vicinius who drops off the defence. You've got Solomon looking to feint to go into that wide position, but kind of hold himself, and Andreas where he is. Now, the thing we've got to be aware of, they're going to play Vicinius, or Carlos, depending on what you want to call him. But he will look to kind of not necessarily play on the shoulder of our centre-backs. He will look to roam and drop into spaces to receive the ball. So in this kind of situation, Bournemouth is pretty poor, to be honest. Number 14 doesn't really go with Vicinius. If he goes with Vicinius, he probably stops this opportunity. He's also then unaware of what's going on with Reed. So when Andreas, does a little drop of the shoulder to kind of find himself some space and plays it into Vicinius, he's obviously has some space. Now, he's able then to kind of move the ball, and, Solomon is in a good position on that side because, once again, he's sitting directly behind the fullback. The right side of centre-back is also watching play. He's not really paying much attention to what's going on with Solomon. Again, so he's pretty kind of not really necessarily in the best position. And the centre-backs had to come out, which to kind of press for the ball. So what then happens when Vicinius plays it through, and this is, again, we've got to be wary of, that they are going to consistently look to kind of make these breaks and play into channels. They're not going to look to really kind of loft the ball into the area. They're going to look more to kind of how can we create cutbacks? How can we get players forward? And obviously, much as we talked about Newcastle, players are pushing high and pushing forward. We've got Reed actually sitting in the area waiting for the cutback. And if we remember where Andreas was, he was on the wing. We've got to be aware that they will consistently have runners coming from deep, looking to exploit any spaces that we have. And obviously in this situation, Andreas is not tracked properly. Reed is not tracked. So if we are lackadaisical or lazy in our kind of following of the ball, because they are going to have runners from deep, we are going to get caught out. And this is one of the things that we saw against Newcastle. Players were just able to run off the shoulders of others. If we are structurally not sound, they will pick holes in us. Not just in their standard kind of play, because they will play with a bit of zip and a bit of pace and look to kind of probe and kind of push into those spots. They will get opportunities like that and score. Now, we saw in the first game when we played them, Andreas came from deep. We talked about it. He will come from deep and he'll look to shoot. He's got a good shot. He scored there, scored in this one against Bournemouth. If we go with the same approach, where we just look to maintain our shape, they will look to probe and push and pull us around the pitch.
Yeah.
If that's how we're going to go, then they are going to find openings, because ultimately someone is going to have to step out. If we ideally, if we're going to play a pressing game, we need to hunt in packs and we need to kind of push them high, because, as I say, as they look to play out from their goalkeeper, if we're not looking to apply pressure there and pushing our midfield up, we're not going to get those second balls. There is going to be times where they play through us. We have to accept that. That's part of it. But if you push up higher and, leave the likes of Rice to maybe sit in the middle, and this is going to lead on to a point that, again, I think we would like to see, but we are not expecting to see. Yeah. Say a Lanzini or a Fornals played in ahead of Soucek. You put essentially Rice in the centre, and his role is you need to follow Andreas, because he is going to be the furthest forward player for Fulham. If you can cut off the supply to him, then you have the likes of Reed and Paulinho on the ball. Now, I know people really like Paulinho. I do think he can be a bit cumbersome and slow in possession at times and can get caught in possession. Same with Reed. Now, I think if you've got two mobile midfielders such as Fornals and Paqueta snapping at their heels, you're going to force them to make mistakes.
Yeah.
Rice being, if he's there to then cut off the access to Andreas, again, you're cutting off a ball for them, because, as I say, they like to go vertically.
Yeah.
Then their only real option then becomes to try and hit it into either the wings, the flanks for Vicinius to make runs onto, or trying to get the ball out into the wings and then obviously trying to bring inside. That's kind of how they work traditionally.
Yeah,
So
I think we're gonna struggle because we saw against Newcastle whenever we kind of tried to press out, we just got played through. We just got absolutely torn apart. And I know it will be slightly different because Fulham's much more closed in pitch, and obviously they're not going to be as good as a Newcastle at transitioning through those lines, but they still have enough quality to do it. You know, like you mentioned, they've adapted that style for the past 12 to 18 months now as a club. So the players know and are aware of the style that they need to play. And like you mentioned, finding those angles, finding those little gaps between our, midfield. And inevitably, if we do play Soucek, there will be gaps in that midfield, especially because Paqueta, as good as he is defensively and as good as he has been in that number 8 role, he can't do the work of two people. And he will at times be pretty much non-existent in that press there will just be no way that we can stop that if we continue with that midfield. So let's just take a look at the kind of predicted 11s of both sides, because again, it's kind of difficult, but with West Ham, you can kind of gather what's going to happen. So for us, it's pretty much one change from Newcastle, and that is literally Kufal for Kera. Again, Soucek, expect him to keep his place, and the rest kind of picks itself. Maybe you'd say someone like Ben Rama might come out, but again, who's he going to drop in for at the moment? It just doesn't look like there'll be any change there either. And you can't really change the back line. We know Fabianski will stay in goal. So in terms of Fulham's lineup, this is kind of how they play. So they would play kind of more of that 4-2-3-1, like you mentioned, with Pereira being their number 10. And then, Polina and Reed as their kind of holding midfielders. Yeah, their back four, again, pretty much speaks for itself in terms of, it's not that great in terms of quality, but they're well drilled and they're coached well. So they know their roles in their kind of positions. And I think Robinson's probably the standout. I think whenever I've seen him play, he does tend to have mistakes in him, but overall he's pretty fast. He's pretty mobile, can get forwards, defends okay. So that's another one we'd have to be careful of on that side. And Solomon's one that's kind of been in and out, hasn't had much in the way of game time, but he started to come in. He scored a couple of nice goals for them, so that's another one to be careful. And then the right side, it will either be someone like Dan James or what we mentioned before in De Cordova-Reid. So it's a tough one. Again, we don't have much in the way of any hope of a change, so that's why we've pretty much stayed the same with a predicted XI. The only difference is Kufal coming in for Kera, and even that's a stretch, I think, for Moyes at the moment. So don't expect too much difference in that lineup. I guess before we kind of get onto more of the West Ham side of things, where can we look to? I know we touched on it there, Mike, about pressure onto the goalkeeper. We mentioned how many touches Leno had in that Bournemouth game, 40 or 50 touches, and most of those.
No, that was just passes.
Just passes.
Not touches.
Yeah,
40 open play passes, which is
exactly
a number.
Yeah, so that kind of, again, that should signal to you and to Moyes and to everyone there that they are going to play out from the back and they will be patient from the back. But if you press well and you organise it well with the right players in midfield to do it, you can put them under pressure. So, talk us through that and, the kind of short goalkeeper pressure that we can kind of put on them.
Yeah, as I say, I think you need players who can move at pace. So again, I would remove Soucek. I know I've seen many formations saying take out Paqueta for this game. The mind actually boggles. Yes, he didn't have a great game against Newcastle. But as the game progressed, he played better from about the 60-odd minutes on. He was a much better player.
Yeah.
But to take him out, and I don't know, again, I've seen things such as his passing is poor, or his pass completion rate is poor, but yet it doesn't give it, that doesn't tell the nuances of, well, what types of passes is he trying to make? Where is he trying to make those passes?
Yeah.
Because if you actually look at someone, say, like Kevin De Bruyne, his pass completion rate isn't as great as it looked. You look at it and go, wow, his completion rate, I think it's around about 78, something like that. And you would go, well, that's terrible. But it's like, no, because he takes a lot of high risk passes.
I think Paqueta is a bit of both. I think with Paqueta it is a bit of both, where sometimes he will be sloppy in possession in times where he doesn't need to be, but a lot of the time he is trying to make things happen with those more innovative passes. So obviously his pass rate's not going to be as high as someone like Declan Rice, who is
exactly. And I can forgive that in a player. If a player is actively looking to influence a game and actively looking in which to take risks, then I can accept there is going to be maybe a lower rate of completion because they are looking to drive or they're looking to open up play. That's why I tend to be quite forgiving at times of the likes of Ben Rama and maybe less of Bowen, because I think at least one is trying to play in his teammates and try and play as part of the team, whereas I think one is a bit more self-orientated, which is why I sometimes am probably more critical on him than I am Ben Rama. Now, Ben Rama does need to improve if he wants to continue, because he wasn't great against Newcastle. I personally think we should be going for Cornet, getting some actual pace, changing it up completely.
Definitely.
Obviously, Soufal, yes, on the right-hand side. I think the back four remains. I would completely, after that performance, Fabianski out of the team. There has to be repercussions for making those bigger mistakes. Has to be, in my opinion, out of the team, and in comes Areola. Midfield three again, Soucek out. He's been terrible for the last few games. The last 2 games in particular was abysmal and probably two of the worst performances I've seen of a player.
Absolutely.
Reflected the manager, in my opinion. Clueless, wandering into space aimlessly, lacking any kind of direction. For me, it has to be Lanzini or Fornals. There's no ifs, buts, maybe. Flynn Downs isn't even a consideration. I've said it many times. He should not be starting over the likes of Lanzini.
Not in that position.
In any midfield, I'm sorry, but whilst we have Declan Rice and Paqueta fit, he doesn't start over those two. They are above in the pecking order.
If he's going to play Rice as a 6, then but I think if he wanted to play Rice a bit further up, then you can play Downs as the anchor. But other than that, there's no point doing that when you have someone like Fornals on the bench.
What I find frustrating is this idea that Flynn Downs is going to release Declan Rice. It doesn't release Declan Rice if there is no movement around Declan Rice in which to do that. If you bring in a player such as a Lanzini or Paqueta, they are players who come from an advanced position, drop into deep, they create pockets of space because they pull players out of position. Having someone who just sits in an anchor role, who's just going to sit there and pop the ball into feet, you're relying on Declan Rice and Paqueta to do all of that movement in which to then try and find 1-2s. Whereas if you've got a player who's also moving, you are able to rotate, you're able to open up pockets of space. This is what I find frustrating at times when Flynn Downs will release him. Flynn Downs is not going to create the space that you get from the likes of a Lanzini or a Fornals, who are dragging players about the pitch because they will also move with the ball. It's movement that does it. It's not just being able to sit in a deep position and then pop it into people's feet, because you are putting then an even bigger onus on the likes of Paqueta and Rice.
I think the only thing I'd say is if you are going to play Downs and Rice, and you do choose to have Downs as the 6 and Rice a little bit further forwards with Paqueta, next to him, I think Rice is actually pretty good at playing in tight areas. I think he's good at that. And he's not naturally going to drift into spaces like Paqueta, Fornals would if you had those two, but it still would be pretty effective and a lot more effective than what we're seeing at the moment with Soucek.
Yeah, but having a traffic cone would be more effective than having Soucek at the moment. So it's like, just look at, I know, again, it was a game that was bad, but the last 2 games that Flynn Downs have come on, he's done nothing to impress.
I agree. I don't think Flynn Downs should play. I think it should be Fornals, Paqueta, Rice. I just think that the Downs, people, criticising Downs, right? Some of it is fair because he hasn't performed well when he's come on, but again, it's just not his position. It's like
I felt for him against Newcastle because he came on, he looked tactically lost, but then pretty much everyone did, and he did kind of sit in a 6. He came on against Southampton. Again, didn't really offer very much. Was kind of in a 2 with Rice because Paqueta ended up sitting a bit further forward when he came on, but he just, again, didn't look like he really knew where he was meant to be, what he's meant to be doing. That's why, and when you see then Fornals within the literally seconds of being on the pitch, is already, he just knows what to do. Because obviously he's more familiar with the players, but that's what I mean. Yeah. We need players that are familiar. I'm not saying going for the old guard. What I'm saying is having players that are familiar in a role, familiar in a kind of position, and that are used to essentially creating, making space, moving with the ball, linking with players. Those players that are intrinsically, they're just more intelligent when it comes to operating or finding space and playing with the ball because they've played at a higher level. And that's no disrespect to Downs. He's still learning the Premier League and that will potentially come. But those players have played at a much higher level and operate at a slightly different gear to him, which is why I would always say that they need to play ahead of him.
And if we did see someone like Fornals come into the midfield, you know, hypothetically speaking, we've got that midfield three of Rice, Paqueta, Fornals. How much more easier would that make playing the pressure onto the likes of goalkeeper? As we mentioned, as that is one of Fulham's biggest things, they will play out from the back and they'll be patient. How do we then capitalise on that if we have those players, even maybe a Cornet as well on the left, who we know will work hard and is fast? How does that then help us in terms of pressing their goalkeeper?
Yeah, well, with Fornals, we know he's absolutely tireless. So the truth is he can swap with, say, the likes of Antonio in terms of that pressure. So if Antonio goes out to one side to press, then, you know, Fornals can push up on the centre midfielder or get into a position where he's in between the centre midfielder and probably the out ball, which is going to be then, say, if it goes to the left side, the right-hand side. And then Antonio can kind of drop into his space. It just means that you have players that are used to working tirelessly and they can move a bit quicker and more mobile. And also ones that when they get the ball, they have composure in which to pass, or they will play the higher risk pass rather than maybe just turning and looking to play the ball out. What Fornals will do is on that right-hand side is he'll be someone that will also drift into those positions, I think, a bit better than Soucek will, and will link that play. Again, he will make those small little one-touch passes or little flicks around the corner that opens up space. Those are the types of things you need to, because sometimes Fulham are a bit rash in that they will press very quickly. Now, if you're able to then, again, a small flick, a drop of the shoulder, you can create spaces and then you can put them into trouble.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful that they are going to try and push out quickly, and therefore we need players who are quick in mind and quick in feet, in which to essentially either roll a challenge maneuver out of it or play those quick 1-2s, even if it's a laying into the centre back, but a pass into them and then moving into position where they can receive the ball. We need players who are quicker in mind and in feet. And in my opinion, that is Lanzini or Fornals, and one of those two should be playing in that midfield three. I would also look to play Cornet because I think we need goals. And I think he is more of a goal threat than Benrahma is, in a more consistent sense.
Yeah.
So again, having him in that position, and also, again, I do think you have to play Bowen again because he has been good. What was disappointing was how much he did leave Kehrer out to dry, but I will defend it in the sense that he was looking to create and looking to essentially attack that left side. And I think, again, that was tactical. We went, Kehrer, you're going to have to just deal with St. Maximin. And he's not going to get back. So we're just going to tell Bowen to sit higher and just attack Dan Burn. I think that was a tactical thing. Yeah. Whether it's right or not is another question. Probably not. But it was a tactical decision, I would say. Now, I think when we got more mobile players, it also means that we can start to handle the pressure that that Fulham are going to bring us. Like, example, again, this is against Bournemouth. So we tend to play out from the back, or we like to try and play out from the back. And this kind of situation is going to happen that, you know, this is against Bournemouth, obviously. So Reed is pushing high. You got Cordova, Reed even pushing up, Vicinius when they're kind of playing out from the back. Now, their players are all going to push and look to kind of cut off lanes. And obviously, they kind of get to a point where they look like they may get out as it's played into the left winger. But again, they move quickly. Now, if you take time against Fulham in this situation, they will look to pin you in. Now, Anthony, when the ball comes to him, rather than looking to kind of play it quickly into the space, he kind of essentially waits for the ball. So we've got Tete's coming behind him. Reed is scanning the pitch and looking for where the danger is, and obviously moves into that kind of square in which to essentially cut off the out ball. And again, if you look at the positions of the Fulham players, they're all kind of covering players. So there's no real layoff for him when he gets possession. And this is the thing: we're going to play it slowly, they are going to essentially pin us in. We have to move that ball quickly, because then that's how you beat their press. And also, as they push players high, that means you have better openings when we get there. And again, this is why I would be looking at the likes of Fornals, because again, he's quicker in mind and feet. Now, in this situation again, Anthony, you can try and pass it into Lerma, but Lerma's pretty much covered by Reed. He can't pass it to his centre back because Vicinius is in a position where he's blocking him. He can't also hit it across field to where his other centre back is, because you've got Andreas. You also got Solomon as well, and Andreas is also covering another midfielder in there as well. So again, you're then penned in. So his only kind of option is to try and beat a player and plays it back to his left-sided centre-back, whose only option is to hoof it up the pitch where there's no one. So they're going to try and trap us in these positions. So when we do get the ball, if there is a player in space, we have to hit pass early. We have to hit it with...
I didn't get that. Could you try again?
My Siri's just decided he wants to get involved. Don't know.
I think Moyes is trying to listen in.
Yeah. Well, he said he doesn't really understand the Fulham squad, which I just find hilarious.
Sounds like him.
Yeah. And bearing in mind, this is meant to be someone who's meticulous about the opposition. He doesn't know much about their squad other than Mitrovic was good for them in the Championship, and they are likely to miss him. Fantastic depth there. I think it's a bit of kidology. I think he does know about them, but it doesn't come across very well after you've just lost to Newcastle. You're stating the next opposition. You don't know them very well, which is...
it wouldn't surprise me. I don't even think it's kidology at this point. I just think it's just...
It just seems like, to me, it's a manager who knows he's going, doesn't care. And it just like, I'll just say whatever. They're not going to sack me. If they sack me, fine, I'll take the payoff. But yeah, there are ways we can attack Fulham. They are an organised team. They do have weaknesses. They, as individuals, we definitely have better individuals across the team. As a collective, they're a good team that understand their roles, and that's why they're doing so well. So you can't underestimate the individual parts or constituent parts of them, because they're a very good team together and that they all work well. One of the things that we probably do need to look to attack is actually attack. I know you said about Robinson, but he is suspect at crosses into the area. If you look at the Arsenal game, 2 of Arsenal's goals came from a cross from the left-hand side over into his area. He missed one of the headers, which then landed to Odegaard, who scored with a powerful finish. The other one was Martinelli getting in between Ream and also, again, Robinson. Now, he's taller than Martinelli as well, but Martinelli just outmuscled him. Yeah. He is weak at aerial duels. Whilst he does have pace and he can get forward, defensively, he does have lapses, which is why I said way back when West Ham were looking at him, he's not probably the player I would have gone for, and I was kind of glad that we didn't, because I think he can be rash defensively. He can fly into things because, again, maybe partly because of his pace, but I do think he has defensive lapses, such as at crosses, he's not necessarily as strong. And that's something we could exploit, which is, again, if you're playing Soucek, then you would kind of say, get yourself in between the fullback and the centre-back. I want you at the back post, but I want you in front of him. I don't want you behind him. I want you to get in and in front of him, because he's not that great in the air. He's not necessarily that strong. And if you get in those positions, you are going to have a very good opportunity.
I think we would also need our crossing to really improve.
And that's why I would say, again, why you need to play Cornet. If you're going to play Soucek, I think you need to play Cornet, so you actually have a natural left footer who can get in those areas and cross the ball. I think that's what we need to do. I would drop Benrahma for Cornet in this example if we're going to play him. Otherwise, again, it would be then, Antonio, you need to go into that space. And then it's incumbent on the midfield. The midfield have to get forward more. They have to get into the area. This is something we struggle with all season. And that's why teams sometimes find it easy to get out, because once they clear it, we've got no one in and around the area in which to pick up the second balls and the scraps. So sometimes it's just easy to play out from. So we've got to be willing to go in packs, if we just sit in our shape, I think they'll just probe and play through us.
Yeah.
And we'll have to ride our luck and hope for something. Obviously, we don't have Skamaka. So, I think we probably got one of our most natural finishers is out. Danny Ings, unless we're going to play players in and around him, again, is almost a worthless pick, really. And Soucek, as we say, at the moment, he's just awful. He's not involved in any kind of possession. He defensively is weak at this point. And it's just not good enough. And I think
as well, we're going to have to be, we've probably coasted through this season with a bit of arrogance from last season, just thinking we'd turn up to certain games and get something. I think we've seen it in interviews as well when players have said we're not going to go down, we're too good, we won't be in this position, a couple wins, we're out of it.
Well, lucky.
Yeah, that's gone now. That is completely gone now. So we cannot approach it in that way or in that mindset. We have to go into this game expecting it to be a tough game, because it will be, and expecting to have to fight, because we're going to have to. So it's going to be tough. Confidence is very much shattered in terms of doing these predictions, but what are you going with as a scoreline? I'm gonna say 1-1, just as a hope that we get something from the game. But I wouldn't be surprised if we lost 2 or 3-1.
You know what? I don't know what. I do feel like we could win this 2-1. So I'm actually going to be positive. I know this isn't me. I am normally not positive, but I'm going to say, look, I think we can get 2-1. I think the players understand the importance of this, and I think the humiliation of Newcastle may go a bit of a way in which to make some of those players have a bit of self-reflection as to that wasn't acceptable. Now, I do think, though, that needs to be supported by a strong selection. And that strong selection for me does involve not having Soucek. If there's only one player that cannot be in that lineup, that will be the one that I'd say. But the only two appropriate options then for me is Fornals or Lanzini. There are no other two options in my mind. If he goes for Downs, that sends out the wrong message, because what you're saying is you're playing two defensive midfielders. However you want to use Declan Rice, he's still known as a defensive midfielder. So you're essentially saying to Fulham, we're coming here to defend and hoping that Paqueta can get there.
If he doesn't change that midfield, then he's absolutely accepted that he doesn't know what he's doing and doesn't have a clue as to how to play. Because if you continue to play Soucek like this, then we're just, there's no way out. So
Paqueta needs help in that final third. Someone like Fornals or Lanzini is going to drift in and around him in that final third in which to support and help him. The reason why he's struggling with his passing and finding pass because he has nothing in front. Now, even if he has someone who's there, in kind of laterally, but at least if they're making those movements in and around him when he's there, that can also help. It also can then garner more space for Declan Rice. And this is why I say you play those type of players, because they potentially push their midfield back. You create more space for Declan Rice to get the ball and also start to create. This is why I say Downs isn't that player, because he's not going to push the opposition back. Whereas I think if you play a Lanzini or Fornals, that's what they do. They will naturally push higher, which means their midfield has to drop and you create separation in their midfield.
Yeah.
For someone like Declan Rice to get on the ball and start to then probe and play those passes. And that's why I will always say Downs isn't that player to release Declan Rice. The player to release Declan Rice is a player that's forward thinking, because they create the space he needs, or not needs, but the space that allows a top quality player like him to truly flourish and to take advantage of. Also means he has in space to gallop into, with one of them potentially dropping in, so then he can play a 1-2 and so on. I think that's what we need to do.
Yeah, well, I just unfortunately, I just don't see that going to change. I think it'll be the same. So we're going to have to just hope that we can get something regardless of that line, because it's not going to be what we want to see. And
my question to you, Frank, is if we do lose, do you think actually Moyes is gone, or do you think he stays?
No, I've said it before, he'll stay. So there's no point even talking about it, because he'll stay. Like, we've had so many times for him to go, and there's no way he'll stay, regardless of what happens. I know people are saying there's pressure on him, but it doesn't matter. There's no one out there. The board won't change, so it's just a circle of the same thing.
The same old thing now is the caretaker options of Scott Parker the guy who has failed at every Premier League club. Whilst he plays some great football, his teams are open and naive, and we will get pulled apart as under him. Obviously, someone talked about Bilic. I can maybe go with that, but again, he's not done well. Every management he's been in, he's done well to a point, and then it nosedives. Maybe for 8 games he could do something, but again, there was also when he was at West Ham, there's a lot of talk about his training was terrible. There was a lot of players just kind of doing what they felt. Kerbishley is just an hilarious one. The guy's not been in management for 15 years, and yet he's been talked about as a potential option. After he also sued the club.
Mike, we could do a whole video on this. I'm going to stop you there because otherwise we could talk about the managers for hours and the options that are being, because it's just a joke. But in terms of the Fulham match, this is our breakdown. This is what we need to be careful of in terms of their playing out from the back and how we could potentially exploit that, and also the pressure they're going to put on us as well. And we need to be brave in possession, and we need to have midfielders that can play, and not someone like Soucek. And yeah, we're going to see what in just 24 hours maybe around then what the lineup is. So hopefully it's something different. Moyes has to get a win, simple as that. We need a win, simple as that. Otherwise, it's just going to get closer and closer to the drop, and we could find ourselves in the bottom 3 again come the end of this weekend. So yeah, if you've enjoyed this preview, make sure to leave a like on the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel as always, and Mike, hopefully we'll be sitting on this review a bit happier. But yeah, until next time.
Come on, you irons.